Hey there, it's Miss Stolte, your music teacher, coming to you with a little your music lesson for the week for those of you who are virtual at home right now. Today we're going to be working on learning a little bit more about a composer called Modest Mussorgsky. And yes, his name probably does sound a little foreign to you. He was from Russia. He was born in the 1800s, the early 1800s, so quite a long time ago. And he learned how to play piano from his mother. He eventually joined the army and was there for quite a while until he left it to become a full-time composer. At some point, his family lost all of their money, and he did have to go and get a different job, and he was only able to do his composing then in his spare time. But it certainly didn't stop him from doing as much composing as he could, including the suite of music that we're going to learn about today called Pictures at an Exhibition. I'm going to start by reading you a book about it. And keep in mind that an exhibition is an art show. I will show you pictures. St. Petersburg, Russia, was a vibrant, booming city in the 1870s. Business was booming. People took pride in their Russian heritage. It was an exciting time full of hope. Everyone looked to the future with great expectations, especially the city's young artists and musicians. "It's finally finished," cried Victor as he burst through the front door. Modeste and Vladimir looked up from the piano. They were playing through a scene from Modeste's new opera. "What are you talking about?" asked Vladimir. "My designs for the building competition," said Victor. "You know, for the city gate in Kiev." He pushed the breakfast dishes to one side and carefully spread his drawing out on the table. "Come have a look," he said. "You'll love it." He walked over to the table and studied his friend's drawing. "It's fantastic, Victor. The judges would be fools not to choose your design." "I agree," said Vladimir. "It's magnificent." "Do you really think so?" asked Victor. "Oh, I hope you're right. It would be a dream come true to finally see one of my designs built in stone." Such was the scene on a sunny March morning in 1873. Modest Mussorgsky, that's our composer, Victor Hartmann, who was an artist, and Vladimir Stasov, who was the architect, were spending the day as they did most days, working together on various projects. They belonged to a group of young artists and musicians trying to make their mark in the world. All three had great plans for the future. Modest wanted to write operas. Victor dreamed of decorating his homeland with fantastic towers and gates, and Vladimir hoped to travel far and wide, telling the world about Russia's great talents. But life does not always go as planned, and on July 23rd, 1873, the lives of these three friends took a turn for the worse. "No," cried Modeste. "Victor can't be dead. I saw him just last week." "It was quite unexpected," said Vladimir, his voice cracking with sorrow. "A blood vessel burst near his heart." Modeste's face turned white. "It's all my fault," he said. He walked across the room and slumped down in a chair. "Don't blame yourself," said Vladimir. "There was nothing you could have done." Modeste buried his face in his hands. "You're wrong," he cried. "Victor was complaining of a headache last week, but I wouldn't listen. I wanted him to carry some boxes over to the theater for me." Modeste took a bottle from the table next to him and smashed it against the wall. "Why didn't I listen to him?" Vladimir tried to comfort his friend, but Modeste pushed him away. "I don't want to talk to anyone," he said. "Just leave me alone." For the next few weeks, no one saw much of Modeste. He hid himself away from his friends, suffering the loss of his friend. When Modeste finally did appear, he wasn't the same man. His face was swollen, his hands shook, he was irritable and mean. Modeste had stopped writing music, and his friends were worried. "What are we going to do about Modeste?" asked Alexander, a young composer. "I approached him on the street yesterday, but he wouldn't even look at me." "It hurts to see Modeste suffering like this," said Vladimir, "but there isn't much we can do right now. I'm trying to organize an exhibition of Victor's art. If I can pull it off, perhaps that will help." So Vladimir and the others got to work gathering Victor's art. By February, they had a huge exhibition with over 400 paintings and drawings. On the day of the opening, Vladimir visited Modeste and invited him to come. "No," yelled Modeste. "I'm not interested. Victor is dead, and I want nothing more to do with him. Do you understand?" "I understand," said Vladimir calmly. He closed the door, locked it, and slid the key into his pocket. "What are you doing?" cried Modeste. I won't take no for an answer, said Vladimir. Either you agree to come to the exhibition with me now, or you get used to the idea of me being your roommate. Modeste narrowed his eyes and sneered. Have you considered joining the army, Vladimir? You're very good at telling people what to do. I'm sure they would make you a general. Vladimir crossed his arms and leaned against the door. I'm still waiting for an answer, he said. Modeste threw his hands in the air. All right, you win. I'll come with you. Just let me get my coat. When they reached the gallery, Vladimir put his arm around his friend's shoulders and said, A special part of Victor still lives in each of us, Modeste. Don't shut him out. Remember Victor, and the pain of his passing will ease. If I have to do this, at least let me do it alone, replied Modeste. He opened the door to the gallery and stepped inside. He stood dumbfounded. Every inch was filled with Victor's hopes and dreams, his fears, and his greatest triumphs. Modeste looked across the room and spotted a familiar face, a gnarled little gnome Victor had drawn several years ago. Slowly he made his way toward the drawing. He stared into the gnome's anxious eyes. I know just how you feel, he whispered, and here's what that gnome piece sounds like. As he wandered through the gallery, each picture sparked a memory. There was a gloomy castle for one of Mikhail's operas, designs for some canary costumes used in a ballet. The next painting showed a park in Paris. People strolled beneath the trees while children squabbled next to a swing. That carefree day was so long ago, Modeste thought. There were many portraits in the exhibition, faces familiar and strange. The wealthy Samuel Goldenberg with his fur hat and arrogant sneer, and Schmoyle, the old beggar, crying in the street. There was a painting of peasants Victor and Modeste had seen on the roadway, lumbering through the mud with their oxen. Victor's whole life was on canvas, from the early morning bustle of the marketplace to the still, dark shadows of candlelit catacombs. Even Baba Yaga the witch was there, from Victor's favorite fairy tale, sitting in her hut built on chicken legs. Each picture was special, but one picture in particular, the Great Gate of Kiev, stirred Modeste's soul. Oh, Victor, this was to be your greatest achievement, a glorious monument to heroic Russia. Modeste's eyes filled with tears. Now it will never be more than a dream. If only I could build it for you. Modeste stood in front of the drawing for a long time. He studied the delicate windows of the church and imagined the stone walls rising heroically toward heaven. Suddenly a smile spread across his lips. Maybe I can build it for you, he thought. Modeste rushed from the gallery. Thank you, General, he cried. He cried out happily behind him. Modeste went straight to his piano. He hadn't played a note in months, but suddenly his heart was full of music. Modeste thought about Victor's art, and one by one the spirit of each picture filled the room. First, he thought of the gnome. It was anxious, scampered up out of the piano, scurried around the room in a feverish dance, then stealthily crept along the floor before running away. Next, mist rose from the piano and an ancient castle appeared. A lone singer sat at the gate with a slow, sad song from ages past. Modeste listened for a while, but then his mind began to wander to another part of the exhibition. A ray of sun broke through the mist, and the castle was gone, transformed into a beautiful park full of birds and children. Modeste laughed at their jeers. In an instant they were gone, replaced by plodding oxen straining under the weight of a heavy load. Peep, peep, chirped the canary chicks. As Modeste played, they hopped out of the piano and scampered across the room. Fluttering and pecking, they tried desperately to break free from their shells. Mr. Goldenberg was not amused. He stepped out of the piano and looked about the room with an arrogant sneer. He slowly walked across the room and out the door, ignoring poor Schmoyle, who stood whimpering in the corner. The market women scurried past next, whispering gossip on their way into town. They didn't seem to hear the tones that rose from the dark catacombs beneath the street. But Baba Yaga heard them. The song of death was music to her ears. She leapt from the piano in her monstrous hut on chicken legs and thrashed about looking for children to terrify. Here's that last one. Growing in strength and emotion, each picture filled the room with music as a special part of Victor came to life. Now we shall build your great gate of Kiev, cried Modeste. He lifted his hands slowly and slammed them down on the keyboard over and over. Mighty chords rose majestically toward heaven in a hymn of thanks. Heroic Russia and the glory of God combined. This is that great gate of Kiev song. For many weeks, Modeste worked at his piano, blending the musical pictures into a special composition. He even added a picture of himself walking through the gallery. From one painting to the next. When the composition was finally finished, he closed the music and carefully wrote the title across the front page, Pictures at an Exhibition. He slid the music into an envelope and sent it to Vladimir with the following words: to the great general, sponsor of the Hartmann exhibition, in memory of dear Victor. In the years that followed, Modeste returned to his operas and his friends. With Victor alive in his heart, he followed his dreams with great success. Vladimir also followed his dreams. He traveled far and wide, from St. Petersburg to Paris and Berlin. And in every city, he told people about Pictures at an Exhibition, making sure that Victor lived forever in the music of Modeste Mussorgsky. The end. Mussorgsky's music has so many different feelings in it, and if you listen only to what's happening behind me here, this is part of that great gate of Kiev. Listen to it for just a minute. Thank you for listening to this story about Modeste Mussorgsky. There is a short quiz, just a couple of questions following this. Please, virtual students, make sure to take that quiz and submit it on Google Classroom.